Acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. An important step in reconciliation is our acknowledgement of traditional land. I'm going to pass it off to John to introduce the purpose and introduce our speaker for the day.
Oh, thanks, Mercedes. Well, the purpose, I guess, simply is that because the Mass Casualty Commission expressed great positivity with regards to the Finnish system of training, it seems appropriate that we learn about it, and no better than our fellow board member, from now living in Finland, but from the Senate in Ottawa. So Vern's got a long history, RCMP, and then chief of the Ottawa service, and then senator, and now he's academic. So Vern, you can do whatever you like with him.
Okay. Did you have something else, Mercedes? You're good?
No, that was everything.
Okay. Yeah, look, I want to start though, because a little bit with the Finnish model, because I've been guest lecturing there now for about a decade off and on. I've guest lectured there for their executive team meetings, as well as some of their community policing piece, because, and it was interesting when I read the Mass Casualty report that they referred to the Finnish policing model predominantly because it's probably one of the lower models, lower threshold models when it comes to engaging from a community policing perspective. Their community policing levels are not what we would consider at a level in Canada as being appropriate. From an academic perspective, absolutely, I would argue might be one of the best I've seen. I've also looked at the Danish model a few years ago, probably 10 years ago, predominantly because they were training the Greenland police as the officers that were in Greenland as well. But the challenge with the Finnish model, I would argue, so when we look at this, because I think every model has areas they could improve, and when they've brought me there, it's around community policing, community problem solving, restorative justice. Those are areas that they touch on, but do not put as much emphasis on as I believe they should. But from an educational perspective, it's a model that I think most could look to and say that's where they should end up. Just so you know that they actually have developed a new curriculum. I shared the undergraduate degree and the master's degree curriculum with John. I think he shared it with everybody else. It's a pretty fulsome curriculum, as you can see. When you walk through it, you shared it, I take it, eh, John?
You did.
Yeah. Yeah. I
John,
mean,
you're
it's
muted. Could anyone else hear John? I couldn't.
No, John's muted.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I thought I heard you say you needed it.
No. I just wanted to make sure you've shared it with people in case they had a chance to look through it.
I'll share it now, just in
Okay.
case. I have a feeling I didn't.
Yeah, it's pretty fulsome. Covers most of what you want to see in an academic degree program, particularly when it comes to their area around research. They focus a lot of their energy around the research piece. They will often speak to the importance of curiosity in policing. And to be curious, you need to be a researcher and you need to be looking for solutions. They do a lot of that work, and it's pretty impressive. As I mentioned, I'm not as impressed with some of their community policing engagement and their training around that, because it touches on areas, but it doesn't really get into what I think has become maybe the bread and butter. Certainly the police agencies I worked with in Canada, whether it was RCMP, Durham, or Ottawa, I thought community policing was a bread and butter for us. But on the other side of it, I think the academic piece is pretty impressive. But this year now, as I mentioned, they approve their curriculum every couple of years. They revamp it. It's not uncommon. I mean, look, Finland has, you can have a look, Google it or use your chat AI if you like, and you'll see that Finland's education system overall is typically in the top 3 or 4 in the world, next to South Korea and a couple of others. So, and I think part of that is because they continuously look to redo their curriculum models. Some of the recruiting into policing leaves a bit to be desired. I've been trying to help them develop a new recruiting program for diverse communities. Helsinki, as an example, has gone from 5% in 2005 that would have identified a language other than Finnish or Swedish as a first language to over 22% now. So with the issues in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, now most recently in Ukraine, there's been a huge migration into Finland, but they haven't been successful at recruiting from those communities, predominantly because they are in a very clear structure of recruiting. You must be fluently bilingual in Swedish and Finnish to be a police officer. Most people who are migrating here, Finnish is 3rd or 4th hardest language in the world to learn. I know personally, but having to learn both of those languages would have no root connection makes it very difficult to recruit. So that's a different issue they have to focus on. And certainly when you go to their police academy, it's homogeneous white school of students predominantly. But the new curriculum, I like the fact that they do review their curriculum annual or every couple of years, and they look at whether or not changes need to be made. For example, this year they're actually going to be looking at case management programs. So this year they'll actually receive a major incident case, and they'll have to work with a number of other students over an extended period of time. And say if it was myself and Devon and Dave, we might be given a terrorism case and we have no suspects, and might take us 3 months to actually, and the professors or the teachers will actually provide intelligence as it goes through the 3-month period before we get to a point of where we actually have enough to make an arrest and then bring it to a successful conclusion. So I have to say that level of work is something we would say in major case management training in Canada, but certainly not at the basic police officer level. So I think that's very helpful, but I think that's feeds into the fact that they have a 3-year degree program, and then they also have a master's degree in police studies that a number of their officers embark on. The way their 3-year degree works is typically they will work for about 18 months through the education side, with some levels of maybe a few weeks at a time working out in the field. Excuse me, it depends on what curriculum they're following, but certainly the ones I've seen, they have people working out in the field every now and then for a few weeks or even 4 weeks. Sometimes back in their home community, they'll go and they'll do a few weeks of ride-alongs and bring them back to school. But in essence, they're running a 3-year, as we would have called it back, probably a decade ago in Canada. It's a 3-year Bachelor of Arts degree with a focus on police studies. It's 180 credits in total. I'm just going through it. I made some notes when I went through it. During the first 18 months, the students complete the basic studies and a part of a vocational studies program, which not vocational in the same thinking we have in Canada, vocational from a tool usage, so their ability to shoot, baton, use of force, those types of things. And then during that same 18 months, they actually have to develop a thesis and actually walk through a thesis document over that first 18 months, completing the thesis before they're done. And then they can actually then start looking at some specialization studies. And in fact, they bring in some courses from other universities. If somebody wanted to specialize, for example, in international affairs, because they're hoping to engage in policing from, as not surprising, some of the criminality we have with Russian organized crime that hits this country. So they can actually do some specialization as well. So look, I know I'm sure John has shared that curriculum. It's a large document. Have a look at it. But in essence, I'm not surprised that the Mass Casualty looked at it from an education perspective. I mean, look, there's some things in the Mass Casualty piece I don't agree with, I don't think that their place was to tell organizations they should get rid of their training facility. I think they should have instead focused on, like we do, what is the larger thinking around how policing could be better enhanced and greater value brought to it, and that's around education. I think if we had a national, and I personally have asked at least 4 public safety ministers to put in national standards when it came to policing. If we had a national standard that would have to be met by the province of Alberta for their police training and education program, then I would be happy, and I wouldn't care where they ran it as long as they met the benchmark that was put in place. Go ahead, Dave, you have a question. I apologize.
No, not at all, Vern. Thank you. My question is around the content of the bachelor program for an operational police officer. Since the Mass Casualty Commission recommendations and our reference to it on behalf of the coalition, I'm getting pushback from operational police officers that many people that enter into policing with an academic background just don't get it. They got to get out on the street and they got to get the taste of it. And does this mean that the firearms and the use of force is given less attention in the program, and that the academic side is given more attention? And how are we going to possibly fill the vacancies when we ram them through in 6 months now, and it's going to take 3 years or 2 years or whatever the length of the program is? And then they say to me, who's going to pay for this? Who's come up with this stupid idea? And that all police officers have to have a degree, and just my comment, they lose complete sight of the broader education, the knowledge, the understanding, the emotional intelligence skills, all the things that are significantly missing from entry-level training in policing. So from what I understand, and I haven't read it in detail, Vern, I apologize for not doing
buddy.
it.
No worries.
Yeah, and I should have read it in detail. I've skimmed it. But the question comes from operational police officers continually is, what is actually in it for an operational police officer at the front end? Do they learn more about dealing with diverse people? Do they learn more about all of the things that you and I know and everyone else at this meeting knows is important for a police officer when they're dealing with people, and the traditional skills are not lost in the 3-year program? What's your sense of that in Finland from an operational police officer's perspective?
Well, I'll touch on 3 things. First off, I can tell you right now that from an operational perspective, they have more time spent on, in that 3-year period, they have much more time spent engaging in true operational matters. As I explained earlier, if Devon, myself, and you were given an investigation to conduct for 3, can you imagine in any police academy in Canada or police training facility that you had a 3-month project that the 3 of us actually had to investigate a serious crime? And we had to learn on that. I mean, I remember, my first detachment in Stephenville, Newfoundland, being given a break and enter. Okay, what now, right? I mean, I've gone through, I think I did a little bit of work around, I got to get my notes, so I got to do door-to-door inquiries, but have to actually engaging in an investigation and being, completely enthralled in that investigation, getting evidence as and when the instructors want to provide it to you, just like real life, right? I mean, I think, first of all, that's what they would gain. So I think they would come out, I know they come out in Finland much more ready to be a police investigator than what I've seen in Canada. And that I'm only talking about OPC, the Atlantic Police Academy, and the RCMP. I can't speak for the rest, but I can tell you they're much more ready to be an engaging investigative police officer. The second part, and look, I didn't have a degree when I became a police officer. I spent 22 years part-time getting 3 degrees, including an undergrad, a master's, and a doctorate, because I wanted to be more curious. I felt that I could learn every time at every level, right? I mean, so I'm not suggesting necessarily that the model in Canada is that you have to have a degree to be a police officer. I'm arguing that you have to have a degree to continue to be a police officer. So maybe it's that you spend a year in an academy, and that maybe you go out back into the field for 5 or 6 months, and then you go back to the academy for 3 months. So maybe it takes you 6 years to finish a 3-year degree. But I can tell you that having done my degree, I had I started it when I had about 6 years service. I finished my undergraduate when I had about 12 and a half years service. I started my master's a couple of years later. It took me 2.5 years to finish my master's. It took me 7 years to finish my doctorate. I can tell you that not only did I learn a lot from that, I brought a lot more to those subjects and in those courses. And you can go back and ask the professors that when I wrote a paper on deviant behavior, I had actual cases that I could say I interviewed people. So I'm not suggesting that the model has to be identical to Finland. I'm arguing that having a degree and being educated should be valued when we continue to argue that policing is a profession. Because if it's a profession, it requires education. And Tracy Green, if anybody wants to see it, she's a former police officer at London Met. She was the dean at Charles Sturt University, where I did my doctorate. And she did her doctorate on education of policing, but her master's thesis is on professionalization. And she focuses around the things and the value add that you get from having an education in policing. Things like the fact that complaints against officers who are educated are less likely to occur. The fact that they are more curious and they're better researchers, what makes them better investigators. And she speaks to the fact that, look, when I was a constable, I wanted to retire as a sergeant, running a 7-person detachment. Pretty quickly, you realize that if you're not educated and you're not learning, at Ottawa, I was managing a $350 million budget. Like, there's no way without an education could I have got to that point. I'm not suggesting everybody should be a chief, but I can tell you that my sergeant in charge of my street crime unit, he was managing, a $400,000 budget and 11 people. He had the human resource and the financial issues I had at a lower level. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think, and that's why when people ask, I can't believe they said we should follow the Finland model of a degree. I always try to bring them back to maybe that's not the structure. Maybe the end result is the same thing, that you end up with an education instead of, look, rope-based training. I can teach a monkey how to shoot. I can't teach one when to shoot, right? So it's that education piece that makes you a better police officer. And I think, and that's why I try not to get bogged down in that discussion, Dave, honestly. And I'm not afraid to have it, as you know. I'm from Cape Breton. I can rant as well as anybody. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if we end up in that discussion, they say, well, we can't hire anybody as it is. Yeah, you're right. Guess what? Who wants to be a police officer these days? That's the problem. Yep. Look, Finland will turn aside 800 applicants this year who will not get in, right? Because people want to be police officers here. I think 93% of the Finnish public are supportive of their police. Now, I'll tell you, they're not as engaged from a community policing perspective, but that's okay. That means that that's something we have that we don't have to necessarily rebuild, that we can continue building on that community policing piece. Because to be fair, I still don't think we do enough on community policing and restorative justice in Canada. I still think what we've done is, earmarked some people to be the community policing guy and gal, and some people to be the RJ guy and gal, instead of an organization being the RJ and community policing organization.
Yeah, Vern, please, I just want to finish that. I agree with you, and I've been advised by many others, don't get pulled down into that rabbit hole. But the reality is that operational police officers on our website, LinkedIn, and other social media read this, and they recognize that there's a problem. And as a coalition, we have to have a reasonable answer for it. And I also know, as you know, Vern, if you take any operational police officer and explain things in a logical, meaningful way to them, they begin to understand it. They're not irrational people. Most operational police officers, they understand what we're trying to do. They will accept it. And in fact, many, as you know, and Devon knows and others know, are supporting and promoting what we're doing. So when we do get this pushback, I think, and that's why I was asking you your advice, we need to give a logical explanation. Whether they then accept it or not, there's nothing we can do about it. But I do not want one or two or three that are influential, like just as an example, like the
Premier of Ontario,
you betcha, or the president of the National Police Federation, of the RCMP, who maybe says that we don't buy into any of this because it's totally unachievable, and then their masses accept that without a reasonable explanation. All I'm trying to do is understand how we can present this in a way to an operational police officer, and that's why I was asking the question about the content of the degree program, Because if they see that and understand it, it makes a little more sense to them, and they're not the irrational people that'll accept it. Anyway, thank you.
And no, that's okay. And I'll tell you, because I had this discussion with Australia Federal Police about 6 years ago when I was doing some work for a think tank down there, and they were looking at instituting a degree program for AFP officers. And my concern with that for them was that at the same time they were doing that, they were implementing a new recruiting strategy around diverse community and indigenous community. And I said, I'll tell you right now, you're shallowing out your pool before you even start this. I said, so if you're going to do that, my argument at the time was, because they have a re-sign at 7 years in Australia, is that they must complete their degree within 7 years. Australia's head and shoulders above us when it comes to distance learning anyway. So they could have easily run I just wrote a syllabus. I teach a course in Ottawa every August for Charles Sturt University on, it's an international study tour for police officers as part of their undergraduate degree program in police studies, for example. And so they have, I had over 100 officers in Ottawa get an undergraduate degree from Charles Sturt University over a 5-year period. So there's ways of getting a degree without having to go to school full time. And I think it's about having a structure in place and having a government, to be blunt, that has the guts to come forward and say, we're going to set a national standard, the ISO, whatever. And we can't force a province to follow it, but if they don't, and when they're looking for funding for their 2,500 officer program or funding for help us support their national police program, NPS service, and National Police Services, when they're looking for funding, we're going to ask them, do you meet our standard? And if they don't meet our standard, guess what? No. And if an officer from those services wants to transfer over from Winnipeg to Edmonton, and Alberta hasn't adopted it, or Winnipeg hasn't adopted, guess what? He won't be accepted. So I think at the end of the day, having a bona fide operational requirement set by the federal government, I think we'll see every province get in step. Some people said maybe not Quebec. To be honest with you, Quebec is further ahead than any province in the country when it comes to police studies. They're the least of my worries, actually. They might be the only ones that are standing in the front of the room.
Well, I think they're the first ones to jump in too.
And I think they would too. So I do think there are, I think if we focus around what a structure looks like without focusing around how structured it is from a modeling perspective, they'll develop a model to fit.
Yeah.
But I think that structure needs to be in place.
Yeah, and I think to begin with, through a long transition period, Vern, it's going to be a hybrid model, like Britain has done. Serving police officers have to do this, new police officers have to do that, and then there's also support from the organizations to get them through over a period of time. Anyway, I don't want to dominate the conversation. I'm sure that there's others have questions, Vern, and comments. I know Kelly did. He had his hand up a little while ago.
Oh, he was waving. That's all. Kelly's always waving.
Well, I'll pipe in and say I fully agree with what the senator is saying in terms of what's required. So what we're doing here in Manitoba right now, I'm, chairing this committee looking at the future of education and training for all public sector employees, not just police, but everyone involved in that arena. And after Ontario made their decision, our next meeting was taken up with this whole issue of a degree or not degree. And finally I said, why don't we get away from the name? Why don't we first identify what we actually need to be teaching officers for the future of, public safety? And if it turns out to be that, we work with an educational institution and now you attach some type of credits to it, and over time you might recognize just by going through what's required, there may be halfway or 3/4 of the ways towards a degree.
There you go.
So let's not start putting the degree in, and that becomes a stopgap, right? Nobody wants to have the discussion. And so for current police officers to be pushing back, Dave, I think we should expect that, actually welcome it. We're not saying that everybody who's a current police officer has to have a degree, but we're saying looking forward, right? Anybody who's 18 now and think at some point in time, I would like to be a police officer or a public safety officer, we're saying here's what's required. And we're going to put it in place. We have an area or a place for you to go to actually achieve that. So by the time you're 23, 24, or 26, you have that and you're coming into policing. So I don't think it's as complicated as people are trying to make it out to be. I really don't. I agree with what you're saying. And I think we can do this here in our country.
And that's the danger with that rabbit hole, is that when you get pulled down that rabbit hole, you can't have that fulsome discussion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And look, I know Brian from National NPF very well. In fact, I would argue he's probably a friend of mine. I've probably, you know, helped him over the last 7 or 8 years as they were going through unionization, because I thought they needed a union, to be honest. You know, the whole the membership were certainly at the bottom of the bottom of the basket when it came to benefits, and they were having benefits taken from them. So what he's trying to, I think what he's trying to say is, bigger than that issue. He's looking at that mass casualty report as slapping RCMP members around. And I think it's personal for him. That's why when he and I've had this discussion, I'm very clear. This isn't about you, Brian. It's not about the Mounties. It's about policing in Canada. And we know it's shitty right now. To be honest with you, pardon my language, there's some women on, I feel, but the guys, I don't care about the women. I do. I apologize. It's crappy right now. And it's not because the members are bad. I think people want to be good police officers. But, you know, when I did the pilot project for the degree program through Charles Sturt University for the Ottawa Police Service, I actually had my guys, I had 7 positions the first year. I had over 100 applicants out of 1,300 officers. And we're not talking, you know, one guy had 27 years service. In fact, I let him get his degree. At the end of it, he applied every year. But I guess I had them actually put together a CV, all the training they've had, as well as the OPC training they've had in Elmer, Ontario. And we sent that to Charles Sturt University, come back, and most of them only had to complete 9 or 10 subjects to get a degree. It took, Ed Keeley is a perfect example. He was my deputy. He's a deputy at the end. Ed Keeley is a perfect example. He finished his degree in 19 months. He did all 10 subjects in 19 months because I told him he wasn't going to be eligible for deputy if he didn't have a degree. And guess what? He was, and he did it, and he became a deputy. So I think when you look at that way of thinking around this, I think, and start talking about the fact that cops want to be educated, right? They want to be involved instead of worrying about whether or not some people are going to take a shot at us. I don't care if they take a shot at me, man. Look, my answer has always been the same. It's not about, I do not believe we'll be successful recruiting if we say you must have a 3-year degree to be a police officer. And just so we're clear, most people think when we say that we want them to go get a degree to become a police officer. That's not the Finnish model. The Finnish model is you're actually recruited into the police university. It's called Poliisikoulu in Tampere. It's a police college university. When you go there, they have the best simulated rooms and a whole town that you go and do your training in. I've never seen a place that's better set up. Now, Finland only has 5.5 million people. But I can tell you right now, when it comes to education, there's nobody better in the world. Maybe luckily they have small areas of templating, but I think we could take that template and start talking about it. The other piece too, and I think maybe the Mass Casualty Report is suggesting, and I think they may misunderstand what a national college looks like instead of a college of policing. And when they talk about getting rid of the depot, the RCMP training facility, I think they're suggesting there's one place in Canada, everybody goes to be a police officer. My perspective is you set benchmarks, you set parameters, and let the provinces figure out how they meet those benchmarks and parameters. If they want to be ISO qualified to be a police agency and a police officer. I can tell you, I had this discussion with the First Nations Chiefs of Police Conference 2 years ago, and they bought in lock, stock, and barrel. They all said the exact same thing. This is exactly what we should have for policing in Canada. Now, for them, they feel like they're not respected, which is sad. For a lot of it because they don't have the funding to actually do the things they should be doing. Not respected, which is sad. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's a police agency out there that will argue against education. And when they do say we can't hire on a recruit, I understand them saying that. But if we had a model by which you went to RCMP Training Academy for 6 months, and then you had to do 4 courses over the next 12 months, subjects over the next 12 months at whatever universities we allocate, like the UK has done. And then you have to go back to depot for 8 weeks. Then you do 3 courses over the next 7. That's the model I think that will be easy to adapt in Canada, as large as we are. And I think having a college of policing, it's easy to argue for it, that oversees that structure and actually forces the Vern, do they have an independent regulatory body? They don't, Kelly. They don't have an independent regulatory body. They only have one police agency in the country, right? It's a national police service. So that's how they're doing it. Same as Netherlands have adopted, and Norway and Sweden and other countries. But I do think, go ahead, Devin, but I do think it's doable as long as we stay out of that mud of thinking, oh, we can't get a guy to hire now at 20. How are we going to get a guy to go to university and then apply? That's not what we're talking about with these guys. Go ahead, Devin.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear you said you had that discussion with First Nations police and that this was not an impediment for them, because one of the things we consistently heard, and I think I shared it with a number of individuals on this call previously, which is actually quite insulting when they bring up higher standards. They say it's going to negatively impact First Nations and, people of color.
Yeah.
As if because First Nations or people of color, you can't achieve that high standards, you don't have education. And like, it is an insult. If you want to talk about racism and discrimination, for you to be putting that out there in this day and age. So I'm really glad to hear you say that. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, no, and look, and Devon, hope you understood my point earlier. Wasn't that we wouldn't apply. What I was arguing is that we want to have the deepest pool of candidates possible and bring them all in. And look, in Nunavut, I'll be quick with this. In Nunavut, we had hired one Inuit officer in 13 years, up till 2001. And 55% of the Inuit who couldn't apply because they are myopic. It's a genetic disorder. So they required laser eye surgery. 100% of our applicants failed the entrance exam, not because they didn't know the answers, because their English skills weren't high enough because they'd done a Nukta to grade 5 or 6. So we instituted ESL training. Over a 7-month period of running this program, we hired 16, of which 14 graduated from Depot. Some of them scored higher than they'd ever seen before. One individual scored 4.1 out of 5, the highest they'd had at 4.04. Not because they can't do this, but because you need to actually have programs in place to mentor people. I've been mentored 15 times in my life. I wouldn't get in the RCMP if I wasn't mentored by a community member, right? There's nothing wrong with mentorship. It's when they start talking about, oh, we're going to lower this. We never lowered the standards for that RCMP Inuit Recruiting Pilot Project once, not once. Two of them now have a law degree, by the way. Never lowered the standards. And I remember meeting with the Canadian Federation of, it was a women's association in Quebec City. And one of them said, we don't want brown faces and red uniforms just because. And I said, you're right. You don't. You want quality policing and you want to be representative of the community you serve. This isn't about hitting notes. This is actually about bringing quality policing. So it won't have a negative impact if it's done properly, and we're still engaging at the right level and bringing them in and explaining to people that we're going to help you get a university degree while you become a police officer. That's what this is about. Education is what we're talking about.
Fully agreed. Fully agreed. So thank you for that.
Okay, Devon.
Comments, please, or questions from anyone?
Well, I think about the military training program, and a lot of people are drawn into the military because their post-secondary gets paid. Doctors, they have to serve afterwards. I think as well as of apprenticeship programs, journeymen, plumbers, electricians. It's a process of school and then practice and school and practice. And this takes it to a higher level where the criticality of policing requires a higher level of education still. But it's in a way, it's shall we say, post-secondary degree-based apprenticeship program. Is that fair to say, Vern?
It is fair to say. Look, I'm not a fan because I've done some teaching in Hong Kong with Charles Sturt University and in India at Hyderabad at the Indian National Police Academy. I'm not a big fan of the models they have for recruiting into policing, which is similar to our military one, predominantly because if you do that, there's an expectation that everybody. I did my doctoral thesis on psychological contract and relational theory, and if you tell everybody they're all going to be CEOs with an MBA, at 7 years they all quit because none of them are CEOs. So I'm a little leery to have that. In the military, everybody's going to be a lieutenant and then a captain, right? They're going to be an officer. They still have a whole bunch of people that don't have a degree that work under them. So I try not to get pulled into that model because it's a real issue in Hong Kong and in India where the vast majority of the police officers have no degree and have no expectations of leadership roles in the true sense of responsibility leadership roles. Go ahead, Mercedes, sorry.
Hi. What are the admission requirements into the policing in Finland?
Yeah, so in Finland, all education is handled the same way. University education is fully funded. There's no costing whatsoever to a person who goes to university. But in saying that, they still have limitations. So say I'll use the Police Ecolo model as an example. They'll look out and say, in 3 years, we're going to have 225 vacancies in policing. As a result, we're going to take 300 applicants in this year. They might get 800 applicants who go through the exams, the interviews. They have to meet the physical standards. So unlike our police foundations in Ontario, where you don't need to meet the policing standards to be in police foundations, they have to meet all the standards. And then they'll take, maybe 15 or 20% over what their vacancy rate will be in 3 years, and they'll bring them into the academy, and that's when they start their training program. But it's exactly the same for teachers. It's exactly the same for nurses. It's exactly the same for social workers. In fact, out of high school, you can go directly to med school in Finland. So it's exactly the same for med school. So they run a very similar program across the board. Now, not everybody's happy with it, because look, in Ontario, and if there's people from Ontario online, you may not be happy to hear me say this. I used to say the Police Foundations program in Ontario had become a fraud, because less than 5% of the graduates ever become police officers. Not that it's not a good program, but the program is not designed to provide policing. It's designed to make money for universities. That's the challenge with it. That's one of the bonuses with the UK model, is that realistically, you're probably, if you're successful in those models and you don't get yourself in trouble and you don't miss one of the other basic requirements, you're going to get a job as a police officer. That's not true in Ontario at the 2-year police foundations program. The vast majority will never be police officers.
Thank you.
Questions? Vern, I think that John, of course, approached you with respect to this. Both Mercedes and Hannah are working with us now, summer students,
Cool.
and doing very well. Mercedes has taken on this project of looking at the Finnish model. And you've agreed to help her out maybe with some contacts and people that she could talk to, steer towards some documentation around the model. Anything like that, and your comments today and your help with that is truly appreciated. The next thing, John, and I'd hope I'm not overstepping it here, is we talked about a webinar around the Finnish model. Get a webinar, or maybe 2 or 3 knowledgeable people in Canada, and perhaps from somewhere else, that can talk about its applicability to Canada. And is it a model, or hybrid model, or a model, and there are many options, as Vern has described, that Canada could implement. Is it worth doing that? And I would really, John, please jump in, but I'd really like to get everybody's opinion on it. Is it worthwhile? I think it'll attract a lot of attention, and at the same time, get our message out as to what our coalition's mission and vision is. John?
Yeah, well, I think that Vern, the individual that you trained under, was Dean in Australia at Sturt. That person would be a superb panelist. And yourself, you would be good at it. And maybe we add somebody that's directly involved in the Finnish system. And,
yeah, the guy who shared the information that I gave you guys, and his name is Vesa. He'd certainly be willing to sit. And Tracy Green is now the executive director of ANSPA, the Australia New Zealand Police Executive Association. It's like their Chiefs of Police Association, Commissioners Association. I'm sure she'd be very interested in being involved as well.
Well, that's tough.
And I'll introduce
a time span from Finland to Australia to find a time.
Look, I do it all the time. I'm on meetings in Australia at 6 a.m. and on meetings in Canada at 6 p.m.
Vern, you said you would introduce us to her. Can you do that with an email to John or I?
Yeah, I'll introduce Vesa and Tracy Green to both of you, all 3 of you guys.
Okay.
And if you want to have a discussion with them, Vesa has no problem talking to him. He's very proud of, he's a major player in the curriculum development, but I think he also recognizes some of their shortfalls, and that's why I end up getting involved there, particularly around community problem solving. And volunteerism never occurs in Finland, right? So it's not just in policing. Overall, there's very little volunteerism. It's social democracy, so everything's provided by the government. So I volunteer now with a group in Helsinki, and yeah, there she is there. In Helsinki, to looking at some of the problems or challenges they're facing among growing Syrian population, trying to develop some community projects. But overall, it's not a big thing. So from a policing perspective, for a lot of them, they don't see community policing as a huge value add, even though they may talk about it. It's not something they're fully engaged in. So he recognizes some of their shortcomings, but I think as well, he could give a good example of why that policing model is working for them.
Excellent. Excellent. Any other comments from anyone?
Dave, it's Ken. Could I make a comment and perhaps ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Please, Ken, and thank you.
I think I'm sorry I was late for this call because I had another commitment, but we've heard a lot about various models for creating a more mature and a better trained police force. One of the things I'm wondering about, trying to shoehorn a model into another country's system could be difficult unless we could actually get further details on the principles upon which those models are built. And I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is we think police should be equipped with the educational teachings to allow them to handle all the aspects and things they're likely to be involved in. So I'm just wondering if, as we go forward, if when we're talking about models, if we should pull out the principles upon which things are based, and that might be a more solid framework for us to build upon. Just a thought.
That's a good point. And you know what, if you look at some of the principles that helped the UK in their College of Policing model and why they went to an education/training model, because realistically at the University of Northbridge, I think it's called, provides the education side, but the actual the training side is provided by the police agency. Some of the principles I think you find there would be interesting, to be honest.
I think that's good advice, and I'm going to encourage Mercedes when she's dealing with people in Finland, and perhaps stretch out or reach out a little bit around what were the principles that were developed to establish the model, because that is very important. Principles guide an organization, and that's what we're sticking to. So that's good advice, Ken, and I thank you. Mercedes and Hannah have joined us, of course, as everyone knows. I want to thank Mercedes for opening our meeting. I think it was very, very productive, Vernon. I thank you for taking the time in what I sure is a continual busy schedule, even though I think sometimes you should back off a little bit, Vern. I thought you were going to get close to retirement there, but
no, this just let me focus on new things. That's what it did.
And Devon, thank you for your comments around not only Manitoba, but your advice too. That's important to us. And Ken, and of course, everyone else. Too bad we lost Kelly. I thought Kelly would have a comment or two. Tam, I'm just curious about your perspective of not only the meeting and the content of the meeting, but a webinar. You think that might be something that's worth us pursuing?
Well, absolutely. I've really enjoyed the dialogue this morning, Vern. Thank you so much. I think you've reaffirmed what all my intuition was saying, that the professional development needs to be ongoing for our police officers and not a predetermined credential to get into it. I think that it's the lifelong learning and the value of learning throughout the progression of their career that they're struggling with, I think. And if there's no path for them either, right? And in my experience, there was absolutely no path in the organization. They were left to flounder. So if we can do anything in providing that guidance and the value of ongoing professional development, not necessarily a degree, but having that as an option, I think is fabulous. Yeah. And as far as the front line, I agree that we're going to get some pushback, but we're also going to get a lot of support, I think, as well, because there's a lot of people in the services that are struggling with this. And I think we don't know what we don't know. And by having a webinar that exposes people to the different models that are out there can only help. I think it did for me anyways, create a sense of, well, if they can do it, why can't we? And what's stopping us from being able to do this? Because I think the majority of police officers I've met across this country have a lot of pride in what they do, and they think that they're doing that, and they are doing a very good job. But there are models out there that we can strive for, and we shouldn't be happy with where we are. I think we should be challenging ourselves. There's a lot of growth there. So I think the more we can get the word out and shift our mental models a bit, the better off we will be in the long run in gaining some support around this. So thank you so much for inviting me.
I'll tell you, Tam, one of the challenges, Doc, sorry, one of the challenges I think, and that's what Dave is referring to earlier, is when they read something like, you must have a degree to become a police officer, the immediate thinking goes to, my 19-year-old son's always wanted to be a cop. Why does he have to go to university to be a police officer? If instead the comment was, when your son is hired to be a police officer, he's going to get a degree, the thinking would be much different and the response would be much different. I'm telling you that I spoke at every platoon meeting at Ottawa Police for 5 years. Not once did anyone ever say, I don't want to get a degree, or I don't think we should be offering degrees for our officers. Not once. And I had over 100 applicants every year. In fact, my last year there, I actually funded 21 degrees my last year. And the deal would be, I'd go and I'd advertise how many positions we have. I would pay up front for the 10 subjects they required, if it was 10. Some cases it was 1 or 2 less because they might have taken a couple of subjects on their own at Carleton or Ottawa U. So I would pay for up to 10 subjects. I'd prepay or pre-commit the money to Charles Sturt University, and these officers would start on a program. And not once did I have pushback from those officers. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Jill, you had a question. Maybe not for me, but for somebody.
Yeah, I'm really enjoyed all the things that you said. It's kind of cool I think a webinar would be amazing. So just thinking just a bit about my background is I had 19-year service with Abbotsford Police. I have 3 kids and I have 3 degrees. And what you were describing, Vernon, I did that. I came with a psych degree. I finished my social work degree while in policing, while I was in police training, actually at the JI, and I got my master's degree. But this is another piece that I think about, like, I work as a registered clinical counselor and registered social worker with first responders of all types who have PTSD. So degrees, for me, policing is the golden handcuff. And it also offers them another opportunity. If you have a degree, when I left policing, people said, oh my gosh, if I had something else that I could do, I would so do it. So I don't think policing is a 30-year career. I think it's a 10 to 15-year career because of the impact of trauma on our officers. And if they had, like, if you have a degree, then you can kind of step off and do other things. Like, they could take their learning from their policing and teach at a university or do a whole bunch of other things. So I think there's a date stamp on policing. Maybe there always has been. So yeah, I love what you were saying, that you can kind of incorporate it. And I've said this before too, when I did my social work program, they were updating the program because social workers in BC only had like a history degree or whatever, you just need to have a degree. They had an 18-month program that had specific courses to shore all the social workers up. You could probably do something like that alongside your policing job, is you could shore people up with an 18, give them credit for already their learning, like I think you had mentioned too, so that they could get a degree, so that it opens other doors for them. So
when we developed, no, it's okay, thanks, Joe. When we developed the program with Charles Sturt University, we actually, because Charles Sturt had not had any police students in Canada when we started that in 2007, well, 2006, because I started it in Durham when I was there. When we actually went and had to pick out 10 subjects in their program, and we had to have some of them rewritten. In fact, I wrote 2 of the courses for them so that it was actually Canadian-centric or accepting of Canadian, because organized crime, as an example, at that point was Australian organized crime. We actually changed it. Now I teach it. It's called international or transnational organized crime, because we wanted to have Canadian students. So it took us maybe 4 or 5 months to rewrite a few courses. Some of them didn't matter because it was about diversity in policing, and realistically, you know, the examples in your paper, whether it referred to your working in Montreal or it referred to your working in Nunavut, it's still diversity in policing, right? So it allowed you to be able to still do that. So we had to rewrite a few subjects, but at the end of the day, and I'm not joking when I say it, I had hundreds of people say I'd like to get a degree. So I don't think this is a pushback. I think the pushback is the misunderstanding, that the argument that we're saying you can't be a cop without a degree. Instead, we should talk about the education you require to be a cop. And that means that education can be upfront. I didn't have a degree when I became a police officer. I had a 2-year business diploma, which I hated. Right, and I may have used a few tools from it, but the tools I gained by being educated throughout my career, as you talk, Jill, honestly, that's exactly what I see as what we should talk about when we talk about professionalization of policing and police officers continuing to be curious, having to do research all the time. It's, you know,
Yeah.
I do my international study tour in August. I'll have police officers from Australia. We spend half a day at the supervised consumption site in Ottawa. Not one of them will support the supervised consumption site when we go in. Not one of them won't donate money when they're leaving and say it's the best thing they've ever seen. Like the ability to learn from these opportunities and educational opportunities, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Can I just say one thing, Tim? I was talking about pushback, and I want to clarify something for Vern too. I was talking about pushback from one or two people who are sort of continual. I have about, I don't know, 2,000 followers or something like that on LinkedIn. And of the 2,000 followers, everybody, by the way, 99% of them support what we're doing. They fully understand it. Most of them are police officers. So while there's pushback, we have to be conscious of it. The second thing is, Vern, when we first started, we had support from the president of national, we had communication between ourselves and the national president, Brian. But since that time, he's not only not sitting on the fence, he's sort of dropped off. He's not participating, which is too bad, because what we're talking about is actually in the best interest of the National Federation and their members in the long term, as you know, to improve their education, improve their ability to do the job. So he hasn't specifically pushed back, but he's not fully supportive. So all I want to be able to do is handle both. I want to be able to people to understand what the long-term vision is, but still understand that I'm conscious of what operational police officers think about this, and I want to be able to respond to them in a meaningful way. And I have to, because the coalition's credibility is important in order for us to move forward. All the state police stakeholder groups, I think, at least need to understand what we're trying to do. So that's sort of a closing comment. Can I, without taking any Mercedes thunder away from her, I want to thank Vern very much for your time, everybody for the comments. I do think this has been very productive. And I know Mercedes and Vern will work together. Mercedes, are there any other closing comments from you?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you so much, Vern, for talking today.
Okay, excellent. And I want to say to everyone else that's here too, that John and I are really pleased with the work that Mercedes and Hannah are doing. The summer student program is educational both for them, but particularly helping us in a lot of our administrative side and doing some of the research. And for Hannah around our visual aids and our social media and all of that, things are going well with them. And I want to say I also appreciate what you're doing. Okay, so thanks to everyone. If there's no other comments, we'll start working on the webinar. How's that?
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks
folks.
to everyone.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Okay.